reviewing the second book in the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins, Catching Fire. So this book, I gotta say right off the bat, I read half of it in one night. Actually, the night that I'm recording this, I read this all. It was a very enthralling story, and I loved being brought back into this world of Panem and really delving back into this world after not having read this series in about 2 years. And if you guys want to hear my thoughts on the first book in the Hunger Games trilogy, I will leave a video link to that review. Keep in mind, it is a very old review. It is something that was one of my first reviews, I think, like one of the first 10 reviews I had, so I don't feel like it's as coherent as I think they are now. But I gotta say, this second book in the series definitely has made me want to finish it, and I think this book does a lot better than the movie does, which is astounding since I really equally liked the first book and the first movie. So for those of you who may be new to the Hunger Games series or may not be familiar with at least the second book if you have just read or watched the first one, the second book is essentially the aftermath of what happens in the Hunger Games with Katniss and Peeta, and a lot of secrets are basically kept from each other because they are trying to live this lie of being in a relationship in order to please the Capitol, and the president gets really involved with Katniss and says that essentially if she doesn't live up to what he expects and doesn't show off her relationship in the way that he wants, her family and those that she loves could be in actual danger. And then later on comes the Quarter Quell, where every 25 years the Hunger Games brings a new challenge to the public where usually there's some kind of big twist involved. And this time's twist is to bring back the victors of previous Hunger Games and have them fight to the death against each other, which includes Peeta and Katniss. So they must go back into the Hunger Games for the second time in 2 years and battle it out with a bunch of other victors that they come across and try to essentially fight for their lives. And amidst all of this, there is this possible revolution that is supposed to be going on throughout the story that Katniss is somehow supposed to be affiliated with. She's not quite sure how it's kind of gone about, but she thinks that because of the things that she has done in the previous Hunger Games, that it has sparked a revolution to where people are starting to revolt against the Capitol, and it ensues a lot of problems, which leads to a lot of the problems that she has in this novel. I really think that the story, honestly, was a really well-developed story. I think that the plot made sense with a lot of things that were going on, and it doesn't surprise me that something like the president coming to this revolutionary character comes out and says, listen, if you don't abide by what I say and you don't live the way that I tell you to, you and your family are going to die. It's a very common thing for this to happen, and especially dystopian stories, because there's always this governmental control that is trying to keep control of their small little world, and when they feel that someone is trying to overthrow it, they're going to do whatever they can to keep it under control. And so it makes sense to me that this is kind of what's going on. As far as the character development of Katniss as the main character, there really is not much between the first and the second. There's not really any changes in her personality and the way she kind of views things. And even towards the end of this novel, that doesn't really change. But I kind of like that because I like the fact that she's so stubborn. She does come around to a lot of different things, though. She starts to look at things in a lot of new lights during the second Hunger Games, which I really enjoy. So there is a bit of a progression within the second novel, but in terms of kind of the beginning of the second novel as opposed to the end of the first, there hasn't really been much change. The focus is less on the family that she lives and kind of tries to start focusing on the bigger picture that is going on with this revolution and things that are happening. She realizes that her family is a part of that, but in order for her to save her family, she realizes she needs to look at the bigger picture, which is trying to help this revolution and be able to overthrow the Capitol in order to kind of bring peace to this entire land that is suffering, because District 12 has suffered for years, and other districts are starting to feel that they are suffering as well because they are not being treated in the way that they should have been, and it only takes one person to really change that outlook. Now, overall, the pacing wasn't that bad. I really enjoyed how a lot of points there was some very slow moments and a little bit more high-intensity parts throughout different parts of the novel. But I feel like this novel could have been condensed so much because of the amount of time that was spent in the Victor's Village. I feel like a lot of the stuff that was done in that place could have been condensed a lot. At the same time, there's so much information that is brought out about the revolution and Katniss finding out about the revolution and trying to kind of go back and forth with whether or not she should become a part of it is really important as well in terms of her character and kind of the world building and politics building that is within this world. It's a really hard decision to make because if you get rid of it, you get rid of all of the extra fluff that is done within the Victor's Village, but you also remove a lot of the political building that is essentially building up to the revolution that is talked about throughout this entire book. So I'm kind of back and forth with it, but honestly, I think I may prefer it a little bit to keep it in, only because without it, we would lose so much of the revolution aspect of the story, which this novel really portrays into, and the start of the revolution. One thing, though, that really upset me, that I was not a fan of, that I will fight tooth and nail for, is the fact that there is no connection anymore between Katniss and Gale. In the first book, especially in the very beginning before the Reaping, it's very clear that there's a connection between the two of them. But since coming back from the Hunger Games, that tie has been lost to the dust for them. And I do not understand how Suzanne Collins could have even tried to play along with the idea that Katniss still is in love with Gale. Yes, she only got with Peeta because it was a survival tactic and she did not want him to suffer in the way that he was. But at the same time, there had to have been some amount of love for him, whether it was subconscious or not, to where she even thought that that was an option, because she could have easily left him to die in the Hunger Games, but didn't. And the fact that I think that she's even continuing this relationship in the first place with him, and the fact that she even has some kind of feelings for him with nothing kind of there for Gale, I really feel like she just could have just stayed with Peeta and left it at that. I don't really think that there should have been any romantic relationship anymore with Gale. Could there have been some romantic tension because they could have been something in the past? Yes, that could have been implemented in the story. I would have really enjoyed that. I just do not think that there's a connection between the two of them anymore, and it almost ruins this entire idea of the love triangle, because the love triangle can be done in such perfect ways where there's so much tension between the two love interests and you feel so much for both and you can't decide. That is what a love triangle should do. I feel like a lot of the side characters were also very fleshed out, despite how much limited time we would get with a lot of them, especially before the Quarter Quell. There was a lot in terms of the relationship built with Haymitch that I really enjoyed, because we got to see a lot more of him and actually got to learn a lot about his past in this book and his past in the Hunger Games. It was really amazing to see that, because we don't get a lot about Haymitch in the first book other than he's kind of rude and he's a drunk and all this stuff, but in Catching Fire we see so much more to him and kind of the reasons why he's kind of become who he is, and it's all because of what happened in his Hunger Games. So pretty much overall, my thoughts on Catching Fire was I really enjoyed it as a second novel in the series. I definitely feel like it set up a lot in terms of what to look forward to in Mockingjay. I really enjoyed the pacing of it and the small character progression that we got of Katniss as she starts to really realize what this revolution is doing and what it is causing. I really loved the relationship that was built between her and Peeta throughout this story, and I really enjoyed also the overall plot structure of the story. I felt that it was really cool in terms of seeing how the story builds and a lot of the highs and lows of the story, how they kind of went about. And my biggest complaint had to be the overall relationship with Katniss and Gale. I just don't think it exists anymore. It shouldn't even exist at this point, and I don't see how people can still ship Katniss and Gale, because they're just not right for each other, and there is no spark between them anymore that is even fathomable to understand. Thank you guys so much for joining me in this review of Catching Fire. I know it's a little sporadic, but I'm kind of running low on time and to do this review, so I am trying to get it done as quick as possible and just get some of my main thoughts out. You guys can go check out my blog down below for a more in-depth view of my thoughts and opinions on this book if you would like to. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me in this review of Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.